A millionaire paid his housekeeper $5,000 just to pretend to be his silent date at a corporate gala, but what she did that night didn't just shock the entire boardroom, it changed both of their destinies forever. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments what country you're watching from, and if this story already has your heart racing, hit like and subscribe right now, because what's about to happen will blow your mind. Now, Sharon Luke had never belonged in penthouses. She belonged to long hours, rubber gloves, quiet mornings spent polishing someone else's marble floors, and evenings balancing overdue bills against impossible dreams. No one knew, not even her employer, Billionaire CEO Douglas Gibson, that Sharon held a psychology degree she earned through night school and sacrifice, a degree she'd never been able to use. Douglas, meanwhile, lived in a world of pressure and polished surfaces, board members breathing down his neck, investors demanding stability, and a corporate gala less than 24 hours away, a gala where he needed to appear composed, controlled, and undeniably successful. There was only one problem. He had no date. And in his world, that meant weakness. That's when he saw her. Sharon, bent over a glass table, scrubbing at a stain that wasn't even there, the kind of focus Douglas wished half his executives had. A wild idea hit him. Reckless, desperate, but convenient. He stepped forward. "Sharon," he said, voice sharp enough to cut through the silence. "How much do you make in a day?" She blinked, startled. About $120. Why?" Douglas didn't even look up from his phone. "I'll give you $5,000 to come to the gala with me tomorrow. Wear something presentable. Smile when needed. And don't speak unless spoken to." Sharon froze. Her pride screamed no, her empty fridge screamed yes. $5,000 could change everything. She swallowed. "Fine," she said quietly. "I'll do it." Douglas finally lifted his eyes to hers, unreadable, impatient, already moving on. "Good. Be ready by 7. Don't be late." What Douglas didn't know was that this simple deal was about to blow up in his face. If you're still here, tap like, because the twist you're about to witness shocked an entire ballroom. Douglas Gibson strode across his penthouse like a man being chased by deadlines. His phone buzzed relentlessly, board members demanding reassurance, investors demanding miracles, the gala planner demanding confirmations he didn't have time to give. He stopped abruptly. Sharon was wiping down a coffee table, completely absorbed in making the glass perfect. She didn't notice him at first. She never assumed he was home. Billionaires rarely stayed still long enough to be predictable. "You," Douglas said. She jumped, nearly dropping the spray bottle. "Oh, Mr. Gibson, I didn't hear you come in. Is something wrong?" Her eyes were cautious, polite, the way someone looks at a person who controls their income with a sentence. Douglas studied her for a moment, the practical braid, the simple uniform, the quiet competence. "How much do you make a day?" Sharon blinked. I said earlier about $120. "Why?" Douglas exhaled through his nose, impatient. "I need a date for tomorrow's gala dinner. It's corporate. Important. You'll sit there, look presentable, smile occasionally. No unnecessary talking. I'll pay you $5,000. The cleaning cloth slipped from her fingers. $5,000? Yes, Douglas said simply. For one evening. It wasn't a joke. Douglas Gibson didn't joke. Sharon crossed her arms, trying to process the absurdity. "So you want to hire me like I'm what? A decorative item that can walk?" "If that's how you want to phrase it," Douglas replied. "It's accurate. A decorative item receiving $5,000. She opened her mouth, ready to argue. Then rent flashed through her mind. Utilities. Her mother's medical bill. The dreams she'd placed on hold. Her anger softened just enough for reality to slip in. "This is insane," she murmured. "But fine. I'll do it." Douglas nodded, already reaching for his phone. "Good. I'll pick you up at 7. Wear something elegant. And remember the rules. Smile. Be quiet. Don't draw attention." Sharon lifted her chin. "Trust me," she said. "I'm not the one who'll ruin your evening." Douglas paused at the doorway, studying her for just a fraction longer than expected. That was new. He left without another word. Sharon exhaled shakily, staring at the empty space where he'd stood. "What did I just agree to?" she whispered. But when she pictured $5,000, She picked up the cloth and kept cleaning. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow would be wildly different. The next evening arrived faster than logic. Sharon stood in her tiny apartment, wearing the only decent dress she owned, simple black fabric, fitted at the waist, elegant in its quietness. She pinned her hair into a soft updo, applied minimal makeup, and stared at her reflection. She didn't look like a socialite, but she also didn't look like a housekeeper. She looked possible. Smile and stay quiet, she reminded herself. Just a few hours. Just one night. A knock. She opened the door. Douglas stood in the hallway wearing a tailored tuxedo that probably cost more than her entire apartment. His eyes scanned her outfit critically, and for a moment, something softened. "Punctual," he said simply. "That's your version of hello?" She muttered under her breath as she followed him. The ride to the gala was suffocatingly silent. Douglas stared at his phone. Sharon stared out the window. Two worlds separated by leather seats and expectation. As they approached the Grand Hotel, Douglas finally spoke. "Last reminder. No talking unless necessary. Just smile." Sharon gave him a tight, sarcastic grin. "Oh, trust me. I'll be the loveliest decorative accessory you've ever purchased." He shot her a warning look but didn't deny it. They stepped out of the car. A chandelier glowed through the ballroom doors. People in glittering gowns and sharp suits drifted like predators. Sharon took a breath. She did not belong here. But she wasn't leaving. Douglas offered his arm mechanically, as if she were a transaction. They walked in, and somewhere deep inside, Sharon, a dormant voice whispered, "Tonight, everything is going to change." They stepped into the ballroom like a pair caught between two different films. The room was a cathedral of glass and light, a sea of crystal chandeliers, flower arrangements so perfect they looked sculpted, and tables laid out like islands of wealth. Men in tuxedos spoke in clipped, efficient sentences. Women in gowns moved with practiced ease, their laughter measured to the appropriate decibel. Everything glittered. Everything behaved. Sharon felt the weight of it in her chest, not the glitter, not the vodka fumes or the soft music, but the way the air here treated people like assets to be polished. Heads turned, eyes assessed. She was aware of the tiny things she had never owned. The way her clutch didn't match any label. The threadbare lining of the dress where it had been repaired. The single pair of heels that had seen too many nights. She had learned to make dignity out of what she had. Tonight it felt fragile. Douglas's hand was a solid anchor on her elbow. He held her like an accessory exactly as he'd intended. He guided her past groups of people who nodded perfunctorily at him and did not even try to look past the surface. They arrived at the main table, a long bar of power where the city's movers and shakers sat like a council. Douglas pulled out her chair and said, casually, "This is Sharon. She's accompanying me this evening. No last name." No context. A place at a table, but no place in the conversation. Sharon slipped into her seat with the practiced silence of someone who had spent half her life making spaces pleasant for other people. Glasses clinked. Servers moved like precise shadows. Conversation rippled market forecasts, mergers, a casual joke about trimming the workforce to keep profit margins neat. Her fork paused mid-air at that. The room talked about people as if they were line items in a spreadsheet, as if loyalty and fatigue and broken childcare schedules were simply numbers to be optimized. A tall man with silver hair, an executive who wore consequence like an overcoat, turned toward them with the studied curiosity of someone who had been trained to look for interesting acquisitions in unexpected places. He read her card name only, no institution, and smiled, the polite smile of someone who expected nothing. "And you, my dear," he said, "what do you make of all this talk about margins and efficiencies? It must be terribly dull for someone outside the business." Douglas's jaw tightened. He had one look for the room that said, "Don't make waves," and he slid it at Sharon like a warning. Her lips pressed together for a measure of a breath. The rules had been clear. Smile, be quiet, do not ruin my evening. Sharon's mind flashed. Unexpected and precise lectures late at night in a community college classroom. She'd nearly fallen asleep during after an 11-hour shift. Textbooks marked with coffee stains that smelled like ambition and exhaustion. The dozens of small experiments she'd run in her head about what made people show up to work every morning or choose to leave. Psychology was not a luxury to her. It had been a lifeline and a map. She met the man's gaze. The posture she'd learned from hauling furniture and rearranging rooms steady, honest, Not seeking approval made the words come out clear and without arrogance. "Respectfully," she said, and the word landed like a small stone in the pond of conversation. "You're talking about margins as if people are machines that can be removed and replaced without cost. But engaged people are the only sustainable advantage a company has. You can cut heads from the org chart and save money yesterday, but you'll pay for it tomorrow in missed opportunities, attrition, and reputational loss. The cost is not just payroll, it's trust." The table froze. A fork hit a plate somewhere. Conversations dimmed like the lights before a performance. That polite smile on the silver-haired man's face slipped into something more curious, the kind of curiosity that looked at scrap metal and saw an engine. Douglas's hands clenched under the table. The warning he had given her without words now roared in his expression. He had brought her to be seen, not heard, but this room full of chess players leaned forward. The man who had asked the question, Mr. Martins, Sharon later learned, did not look offended. If anything, he looked interested. He nodded slowly, tapping a napkin like someone collecting thoughts. "Go on," he said. "I'm listening." Sharon's voice found momentum. She had thought about this for years. She'd listened to managers talk past employees in break rooms, to bosses who mistook busy work for productivity. The words poured out, not as theory but as a practiced argument built from cold facts and human stories. Engagement shows up in the numbers. It's measurable. When people feel valued, they show up on time. They solve problems, instead of passing them on. They defend the brand when someone speaks ill of it. We save on hiring, on training, on oversight. We save on the hidden costs of stress that bleed into errors and sabbatical claims. Investment in people is not charity, it's risk management. Heads turned from polite surprise to a more charged focus. Questions came not from hostility but from curiosity. How exactly would you measure that? She was asked. What do you mean by value? Can you show it in a spreadsheet? Sharon reached into the little mental notebook she'd been carrying for years. Lists of small interventions. She had seen smooth operations in bakeries, makeshift clinics, and small offices where people with no power had built trust anyway. She gave examples. A simple integration program for new hires that reduced first-month turnover by double digits. A shift from punitive performance reviews to coaching that improved productivity. A micro-feedback loop that prevented repetitive errors in customer service. Her examples were concrete, precise, delivered without flourish. The room listened. People leaned forward. Mr. Martin's eyes glinted. When she finished, the polite murmur of the ballroom was gone. There was a different noise, the soft click of intellect as ideas reorganized themselves around the new data she'd provided. Someone laughed, not unkindly. Another man tapped his business card against the table, thoughtful. Douglas sat frozen, a wine glass suspended at his lips. He was the owner of a plan that now hummed with unpredictability. He had brought into his public life an anomaly who had ignored all the instructions and forced the night into an entirely new direction. Mr. Martins cleared his throat and, with the disarming warmth of someone about to make a strategic offer, reached for his wallet. He handed Sharon a business card, not because she dazzled with credentials, but because she had shown that she thought differently. "Miss Luke," he said, and the use of her last name finally given made it sound like recognition rather than charity. "Come see me on Monday. We have an opening in our human resources team. Entry level, yes, but with real potential. We need perspectives like yours." For a second, the world narrowed to the rectangle of paper in Sharon's hand. Its edges were small and ordinary. The possibilities it represented were not. The table rippled with murmurs that had the tone of surprise and approval. A few people leaned in to exchange quiet conjectures about where this might lead. Douglas, color returning to his face in sharp flashes, felt the humiliation like a physical thing. The man he'd hoped to present as whole and in control now had a housekeeper. His housekeeper offered employment in front of him by the very people whose approval mattered. On the walk back to the car, his silence was tight and brittle. The drive home was a replay of the ride over. Only now both of them carried new weights. Sharon felt a kind of buoyancy. She had expected money from the night. She had not expected acknowledgement. The idea that the card could be more than a token tightened like hope. When the car pulled up outside her building, Douglas turned to her, his voice low and ironized. "On Monday," he said. "I don't want you showing up at any office trying to create problems for Porter Industries. You were simply my companion for one evening. I'll give you an extra," he stopped, calculating. $10,000, he finished, eyes hard. "Forget the job. Forget the card. Let tonight stay tonight." The offer landed like a small hammer. It was not merely an attempt to buy silence. It was an attempt to reassert ownership over what he'd set in motion. He was testing the boundaries to see if he could purchase control. Sharon's laugh broke out before she could stop it, a sound equal parts astonishment and quiet fury. She let the sound stretch across the empty street between them. "You think money can fix this, Douglas?" she asked, and she said his name like it was a thing she'd given him by cleaning his rooms, not by staying quiet. He plunged on, offense masking aggravation. "Think about what I'm offering. 10,000. You'd be comfortable for months." She folded the business card between her fingers and kept it visible, a small anchor. "You can buy many things," she said softly. "But you cannot buy where I intend to go. That card is not about money for me. It's about being allowed to do the work I trained for." Her refusal wasn't theatrical. It was steady, clear, like someone returning change to a cashier. The words simple stung. Douglas watched her. The clean lines of his control had begun to blur. "Keep the 5,000, she added, surprising herself with the casualness of the remark. "I earned it by showing up." He stared for a moment, the evening's events replaying behind his eyes. Then he started the car and drove away, the hum of the engine swallowing what was left unsaid. Sharon stood on the sidewalk, card in hand, dress damp at the hem from the night's waves of movement. The city smelled like rain and possibility. Around the corner, a taxi discharged late customers. Above them, lights blinked like a line of small, cautious promises. She tucked Mr. Martins's card into her clutch, an ordinary gesture, but a distinct pivot in the story of her life. She had come tonight to be paid. She would leave with the knowledge that there were doors only recognition could open, and in the quiet that settled as she walked up the stoop of her building, there was an easy, bracing thought. What's about to come next will not be bought or bullied. It will be earned. "Tell me where you're watching from. Could you imagine saying no to this moment?" By the time Monday morning arrived, Sharon's fingers still felt the phantom chill of crystal and the weight of the business card in her clutch. She dressed like someone stepping into a role she hadn't been paid to rehearse. Simple black trousers, a modest blouse, a blazer she'd bought on clearance and pressed as if it were haute couture. She walked to the Porter Enterprises building with the same steady pace she used to cross polished floors. Purposeful, aware of every small sound and stain. The elevator ride up felt like a rolling rehearsal, her heart beat with an unfamiliar rhythm, a mix of fear, pride, and the odd thrill of a door slightly ajar. The lobby swallowed her for a moment. Glass, chrome, a receptionist whose smile had the practiced warmth of a training manual. Sharon handed over the business card with Mr. Martins's name and watched the small machine of corporate bureaucracy accept it and transform her into a visitor badge. The plastic rectangle felt heavier than the paper had. It clipped to her lapel, and suddenly the world around her rearranged. She was not just someone who kept things tidy. She was someone with a name in the system. Jennifer met her at the HR door like a friend with a welcome mat. Mid-30s, efficient, and sharp-eyed, Jennifer extended a hand and then, seeing Sharon's nerves, hugged her quick and fierce. "Mr. Martins told me you'd be coming," Jennifer said. "I'm Jennifer. I'll be your manager while you get your bearings. Don't worry, everyone's nervous on a first day. We just pretend we aren't." Her laugh was an easy bridge. It broke the ice like a warm spoon through chilled custard. Jennifer led Sharon to a tidy cubicle that smelled faintly of coffee and new printed reports. A small plant leaned toward the light like a creature relieved to be noticed. "Meet the team," Jennifer said, ushering her in. "Thomas, customer service guru and unofficial office comedian. Linda, accounting, who loves spreadsheets the way other people love puppies. Patrick, our analyst. They're the ones who will keep you grounded. Each face registered surprise for a heartbeat when Sharon explained, in plain terms and without fanfare, that she had studied psychology and that she was ready to listen and learn. Thomas grinned as if taken into confidence. Patrick's eyes brightened like someone who despised fuzzy thinking. Linda adjusted her glasses with a faint, delighted skepticism that transformed into curiosity. You read people well, Thomas said. That's useful here. We've got a lot of talent that doesn't know how to speak up. They handed her a stack of reports like an initiation rite. Sharon glanced through the documents. Employee satisfaction scores, retention rates, complaint logs. The kind of dry metrics that could look like a foreign language until you found the patterns. Her first morning was a blend of introductions and small explanations, where the coffee was kept, how to log into the system, who liked what kind of snack. It should have felt mundane, but every casual comment, "We've been losing people in logistics," was an incision into a problem she'd been thinking about since the gala. She listened more than she spoke, collecting fragments the way she used to collect lost socks and mismatched silverware to find how they fit into a whole. Douglas, it turned out, had decided that monitoring was a sport. He showed up late morning with the precise, unreadable face he had worn at the gala, and he did not waste time on pleasantries. He drifted to the HR doorway like a hawk checking its territory. "Miss Luke," he said, tone layered with brittle politeness. "I see you've been given a desk." Sharon smiled, honest. Nothing performative. "Yes. Thank you for the opportunity." Douglas's eyes flicked over the reports on her screen. "I hope you understand the expectations here. Porter Enterprises moves fast. Mistakes have consequences. You said that at the gala," Sharon replied calmly. "You also said people are replaceable. I feel we'll just have different definitions." His mouth tightened. There was a moment of silence that tasted like a challenge. "If you plan on making a career here, remember this. Don't assume you're entitled to anything because of one speech. This place will either make you or break you." She met his glare with her own steady look. "I didn't come here for entitlement," she said. "I came here to do work." There was a crackle between them, not yet hostility, not yet truce, the sound of friction that would later burn into respect or resentment. He left after that, but the sense of being watched lingered like perfume. That night she stayed late. The office emptied into the hush of midnight. Janitorial carts, locked laptops, the soft whir of the building's systems. Sharon hunched over spreadsheets with the kind of focus she'd employed when she needed to calculate how many hours of overtime would be required to cover a month's rent. She ran simple analyses, cross-referencing employee exits with the timing of management changes, mapping complaints against shift patterns. Numbers that had once been meaningless now began to hum with explanation. Her listening tour began the next day. She walked apartments like she walked rooms at a mansion, knocking lightly on doors, leaning in to hear stories. The receptionist in tears over unpredictable schedules, an exhausted nurse from the on-site clinic who confessed to rounding twice as fast, a customer service rep who worked extra shifts because he couldn't afford medical bills for his child. The stories were small, raw, and the pattern was always the same. People pushed until they snapped, then replaced. Back at her desk, Sharon sketched a micro-intervention, a small change in the customer service workflow that eliminated redundant paperwork. It was not glamorous, replacing 4 forms with 1 and automating the routing to save clerical hours, but it was precise, measurable, and it respected the people who did the work. She implemented the tweak the way she had learned to repair a torn hem. Quietly, with steady hands, testing the thread, and then the stitch. The first morning, the new form was in place. The customer service team reported fewer misdirected complaints and a noticeable smoothing of their daily workload. Thomas came by with a mug and clapped her on the shoulder like a man who'd discovered fresh coffee after a long fast. "Where did you learn to do this?" he asked. "This actually works." Sharon offered no grand explanation. She had gestured toward the small process changes she'd seen work in other environments. She spoke in the language of benefits and time saved. Linda, the accountant, ran the numbers and smiled, the kind of smile that usually lived in libraries and balance sheets. "You saved us hours a week," Linda said with a professional delight that felt almost like applause. If we scale this, It'll free up staff time and cut errors. The small victory passed like a ripple. It was not a headline or a press release. It was 10 minutes shaved from a repetitive chore, a person no longer forced to shuttle paper between desks. The team noticed, complaints ticked down. Sharon felt the faint lift of credibility under her feet. Douglas noticed too. He began to appear in the department more often. Not necessarily to criticize, but to watch. His visits were punctuated with questions that carried the weight of an investor's intuition. He asked about timelines, budgets, implementation risks. He pushed back on a few points not out of ignorance, but out of the reflex of someone who had built a company by weighing options against the bottom line. Their exchanges remained pointed and dryly witty, like two chess players who enjoyed the tension of a match. He would lob a cynical remark about idealism being expensive. She would counter with a real-world example and a spreadsheet that made the cost of cynicism visible. At the gala, "You said people were replaceable," he reminded her one afternoon, jaw tight. "I said that's how some people talk," she replied, without heat. "I said it's short-term thinking." He gave a grunt that could have been a laugh or a concession. The team began to rally around her work. Patrick compiled a dashboard that displayed early indicators of fatigue and burnout. Jennifer shepherded her through internal politics with a soft, practical candor. Sharon had not expected mentorship in the form of late-night coffees and candid advice, but she accepted it like a tool. This was work she had imagined doing, but had never been permitted to try. Small wins accumulated like coins in a jar, hardly the full fortune she imagined, but tangible enough to buy confidence. She found herself thinking differently about the empire she'd entered. It was not an impenetrable fortress of suits. It was a network of people who could, if someone bothered to listen, be made to work better together. Then, the email arrived. From the executive secretary, "You're requested to attend a restructuring meeting this Thursday. Please prepare notes on the customer service pilot and be ready to present a 5-minute overview." Her pulse surged. A public meeting. Directors in attendance. A chance to speak where the stakes were high and where Douglas's glare could be either a furnace or an unintended spotlight. Sharon read the message twice, felt the weight of it settle like a coin in her palm, and then, without theatrics, began to prepare. She had not come to be silent anymore. She'd come to be counted. What she had done in the quiet would have to withstand scrutiny in the light. She clicked on her keyboard, opened a fresh document, and the words arranged themselves with the clean logic of someone who had spent years practicing not to be afraid of speaking the truth. Outside, the city marched on in its indifferent rhythm. Inside, a new rhythm was forming. One measured in data and in the hard human work of making systems better. Sharon leaned into it, ready to speak when the time came. What's about to come next will demand not just facts but courage. By Thursday morning, the air in Porter Enterprises carried the static charge of impending conflict. Rumors of restructuring had been circling the building like vultures, whispers of layoffs, budget cuts, strategic refocusing. Employees walked the hallways with guarded expressions, clutching coffee cups the way one clutches an anchor in rough water. Sharon arrived early, clutching her neatly organized binder packed with charts, staff testimonials, workflow diagrams, and the results of her week-long listening tour. She'd spent late nights layering her analysis with the kind of clarity people couldn't ignore, numbers woven with human context. The company wanted a 15% staff reduction. Sharon wanted none. She just had to convince a board of directors who believed spreadsheets were more trustworthy than the people filling them. She took a breath, tightened her grip on the binder, and stepped toward the executive conference room. Inside, the boardroom felt colder than usual. A long glass table reflected the city skyline behind it. Steel, glass, ambition. Executives gathered in their chairs like chess pieces sliding into place. Their expressions ranged from bored to expectant to mildly irritated, as though layoffs were a tedious but necessary chore. Douglas William Porter technically sat at the head of the table, posture sharp, hands clasped. He gave Sharon a brief glance that revealed nothing except a flicker of something like tension, control, worry, maybe curiosity. Mr. Martins, seated near the middle, offered her a small nod of encouragement, the only warmth in the room. "Let's begin," Douglas said, tapping the agenda. "Customer service restructuring." Finance recommends a 15% reduction in staff to improve our operating margins for Q3. Numbers are clear. We can do more with fewer people. A murmur of agreement flowed around the table. Sharon kept her face neutral, though her pulse pounded. She had seen the spreadsheets too, but she'd also seen the people behind them. The finance director clicked a remote, displaying a slide full of graphs that showed rising costs, stagnant output, and projected savings through layoffs. Cutting 15% is not only viable, he concluded, but necessary. We expect to see a 20% improvement in efficiency within 2 quarters. The board nodded. Douglas's gaze flicked to Sharon, a reminder that she wasn't expected to speak unless spoken to, but Jennifer's whisper from last night echoed in her mind. If you believe your work matters, then speak, even if your voice shakes. And then, louder still, the voices of the employees she'd interviewed. I can't lose this job. My son's medical bills. If they cut 2 more people from our shift, we'll break. Sometimes management forgets we're human. When the financial presentation ended, Douglas closed his folder. Any questions before we proceed to vote? Sharon raised her hand. The room paused. Several heads turned slowly toward her, as if a decorative plant had suddenly grown the ability to speak. Douglas's eyebrow twitched. Miss Luke? A warning disguised as permission. Respectfully, Sharon said, rising from her chair with the quiet confidence she'd built word by word over the past week. I have a counter-analysis, the finance director sighed audibly. A few executives exchanged looks, some curious, some irritated. Mr. Martins leaned back in his chair, a spark of anticipation in his eyes. Douglas said nothing. He couldn't stop her without exposing his own pettiness, and he knew it. Sharon walked to the large screen and connected her laptop. Her opening slide wasn't a graph, it was a quote. People don't quit jobs, they quit pressures they aren't allowed to name. A ripple of discomfort moved around the table. She continued. Your numbers aren't wrong, but they're incomplete. A hush fell. I interviewed 30 employees this week, Sharon said. Across shifts, roles, and tenure. I also traced complaint spikes, turnover points, training gaps, and workflow bottlenecks. Another slide came up side-by-side charts comparing layoffs from previous years with resulting increases in overtime costs, customer complaints, recruitment expenses, and burnout-related sick leave. Every time we've reduced staff, she said, we've paid for it later in ways we never put on the first slide. The HR director stiffened. The finance director leaned forward, surprised. Douglas's jaw slowly unclenched just slightly. Sharon clicked to the next slide. This, she continued, is the bottleneck chart I built after observing the customer service team for 2 days. The room focused on the diagram showing redundant approval loops, form duplication, and outdated software systems that forced employees to repeat tasks. These inefficiencies aren't caused by people, she said. They're caused by processes. She moved to a slide titled, The 20% Solution Without Cutting a Single Job. Gasps, small ones broke out. She outlined 3 specific alternatives. 1. Automation of redundant forms. 1 form replaces 4. 2 signatures replace 5. Automated routing removes manual sorting. Projected impact. 7% increase in efficiency. 2. Micro-training program for skill gaps. A 2-hour weekly coaching session to reduce error rates and improve turnaround time. Projected impact. 6% increase in accuracy. 3. Reassigned float staff during peak hours. No new hires. No overtime. Just strategic repositioning. Projected impact. 8% smoother workflow management. She paused, letting the numbers settle. Combined, she said. These changes provide the same efficiency gains as a 15% staff reduction, but without sacrificing the morale and loyalty of the people who serve as the backbone of our customer experience. Silence. Absolute silence. It was as though the entire room was recalibrating itself around a new equation. Then, Mr. Martins spoke first. Well done, he said softly but firmly. Very, very well done. A director near the end of the table shifted in his seat. She makes a compelling point. The finance director frowned at the slides, not dismissing them, studying them. Douglas's reaction was a war in real time. Confusion, annoyance, recognition. A flicker, just a flicker of respect. He cleared his throat. Your proposal is ambitious, Miss Luke, but ambition doesn't guarantee results. I understand that, Sharon replied calmly. That's why I'm proposing a pilot program. 6 weeks, 1 department. If my projections fail, we'll reassess. But if I'm right, her eyes lifted to meet his, then we'll have proved that layoffs are the laziest solution, not the smartest. A murmur spread. Douglas leaned back, studying her like someone trying to understand a puzzle that had gained new pieces. Finally, he spoke. All right, the board will approve a pilot project. He paused. But I want preliminary results in. He glanced around the room, then directly at her. 6 days. Gasps erupted. Jennifer inhaled sharply. Mr. Martin sat up straighter, startled. 6 days? Sharon repeated. That timeline is realistic for someone who claims to know this company as well as you say you do, Douglas said, voice smooth but blade sharp. It wasn't just a test. It was a challenge, a dare, a warning. Sharon felt heat rise in her chest, but not fear. Determination. If that's what you want, she said, then that's what I'll deliver. Douglas nodded once, eyes locked on hers, frustration, admiration, and confusion battling beneath the surface. The meeting adjourned. Executives filed out quietly, whispering to each other about the unexpected brilliance of the housekeeper turned analyst. As Sharon gathered her materials, Mr. Martins approached. You did exceptionally well, he said. And don't worry about Douglas. He pushes hardest on people he secretly respects. Sharon allowed herself a breath. Then, if you were in the boardroom, would you applaud or boo? She smiled lightly. Comment your city and stand with me. She stepped into the hallway. Douglas was waiting outside, arms crossed. His voice was low. You wanted to show the board what you can do, he said. Now you'll have 6 days to prove it. Sharon lifted her chin. I don't need 6 days, she said. I just need the truth, and the truth is already on my side. The flicker of a smile tugged at his mouth before he suppressed it. They stood in that charged silence, professional, tense, magnetic. Then Sharon walked past him, binder under her arm, determination in her stride. 6 days. 6 days to change not just a department, but her entire fate. What's about to come next will push everyone to their limits. The next 6 days unfolded like a storm, fast, loud, relentless. Sharon barely recognized her own life. Days blurred into nights. Coffee cups stacked on her desk like a small architectural project. Her team, Thomas, Linda, Patrick, and even Jennifer, when she could, worked with her as if they were racing a clock that demanded respect. They were. Douglas's 6-day deadline hung over them all like a shifting shadow. Some people whispered that failure was inevitable, that she'd been set up to be embarrassed. Others whispered something uglier, that Sharon didn't belong here at all. But her team? They didn't whisper. They worked. By Monday night, their small corner of HR looked like a war room. Sticky notes marked patterns. Charts displayed dips and spikes in workflow efficiency. Screens flickered with live data feeds from the pilot department. Thomas sprawled in a chair, half asleep, muttering, If this project doesn't make history, at least let it make overtime pay. Linda laughed without looking up from her spreadsheet. History is more valuable than overtime, says the accountant. Unfortunately for us, Patrick, who rarely spoke more than necessary, glanced toward Sharon. You're good at this. Too good. Where did you learn to see patterns this fast? Sharon paused mid-typing. Cleaning houses, she said with a small shrug. You learn to see what's out of place, even when no one else notices. He smiled, not pity, not surprise, just quiet respect. It was that moment, small and unpolished, that warmed her more than she expected. Near midnight, Jennifer slipped in holding sandwiches. Break time, she ordered. Your eyeballs are going to melt. Sharon allowed herself a breath. Her gaze drifted toward the glass wall across the office, Douglas's floor. His lights were still on. His silhouette paced like a man carrying a storm in his chest. Every time he looked into their department, his eyes found her. Not with disdain anymore. Not with mockery. Something far more dangerous. Far more complicated. On Tuesday, Sharon had to deliver early findings to Mr. Martins. She walked into his office with her binder, expecting a quick review. Instead, he motioned her toward the window. How are you holding up? She blinked. No one had asked her that since she'd started. "I'm doing what needs to be done," she said carefully. Martins nodded. "Your work is impressive, but I want you to be careful. Not everyone wants you to succeed." Sharon frowned. "Because I'm new?" "Because you're different," he corrected. "And because some people fear what they can't control." When she left his office, his warning echoed in her mind, but she didn't yet know how soon she'd see its truth. By Wednesday, the mood in the office shifted. Conversations dipped when she walked by. People stared a little too long. Linda approached her cautiously that afternoon, biting her lip. "Sharon, you should know something." Sharon set down her pen. "What is it?" "Someone's spreading a rumor," Linda whispered, "that you only got this job because you went as Douglas's date to the gala." Sharon's stomach dropped. "Who said that?" "We don't know," Linda admitted, "but it's coming from higher up. Someone in operations. Operations where the director, Mr. Drayton, had already given her hostile looks during meetings." Thomas chimed in, anger sharp in his voice. "It's deliberate. Someone wants your credibility gone before you even present." Credibility. Reputation. The fragile threads tying her new life together. Sharon inhaled, steady and controlled. "Rumors are noise. Our work is proof." Patrick nodded once. "Then let's make the proof undeniable." But the whispers continued. "Housekeeper, pretty face. Douglas's pet project. Golden girl, won't last long." Each phrase was a stone thrown at the foundation she was trying so desperately to build. That evening, Douglas appeared at her cubicle. Not the composed Douglas who led board meetings, not the icy figure who spoke in exact, controlled syllables. This Douglas looked unsettled. "Walk with me," he said. Sharon followed him into a small conference room, arms crossed, ready for confrontation. He shut the door. "I heard about the rumors," he said tightly. Sharon met his eyes, unflinching. "Did you start them?" "No," he said immediately. "But I may have caused them." Her expression sharpened, not anger, not surprise, but disappointment. The kind that hits deeper. Douglas sighed, a sound he would never allow anyone else to hear. "Sharon, I made a mistake." She blinked. He drove on, words tumbling. "I should have never taken you to the gala. I didn't think, damn it, I didn't think it would affect anything. Now you're being dragged into company politics because of me." She said nothing. "You shouldn't have to deal with this," he added quietly. Sharon folded her arms. "I deal with it because I earned my place here. I deal with it because I deserve to be heard. I won't let gossip take that away." He stepped closer, frustration heating his voice. "Sharon, let me fix this. Let me buy your way out of this mess." She froze. "Buy?" Douglas exhaled, pacing. "I'll give you $10,000. No, $15,000. Take a leave. Step back. Don't present this pilot. I'll smooth everything with the board. You can come back later, or not at all. You'll have money. Safety." Sharon stared at him as if he were speaking a different language. "This is your solution?" she whispered. "It's protection," he snapped. "You don't understand how brutal this world can be. This project, this room, you're not ready. They'll push you until you break." She stepped forward, anger in her eyes, but not shouting anger, cold, disappointed anger. "Douglas," she said, voice low. "I've scrubbed floors while executives laughed in boardrooms. I've counted coins to buy textbooks. I've survived humiliation far worse than anything in this building." She leaned in, eyes bright and steady. "You can keep your $15,000. My dignity is not for sale." His breath caught. Her words sliced through him more sharply than she knew. Sharon walked past him, hand on the door. "And, for the record," she added, "if you're truly worried about me, then stop making me your mistake." She left him standing there, wordless, shaken, exposed. "If this moment gave you chills, hit like and share. Some things aren't about money, they're about dignity." By Thursday morning, something was wrong. Very wrong. Patrick rushed into Sharon's cubicle, face pale. "Sharon, the pilot numbers, the productivity chart. What about it?" "It tanked overnight." Sharon blinked hard. "That's impossible." We saw improvements. Patrick shook his head. Look. She scanned the report. Customer satisfaction had plummeted. Turnaround time had doubled. Complaint tickets spiked so sharply it looked artificial. No, she whispered. No, this doesn't make sense. Something's off. Jennifer hurried over, worry etched on her face. This smells like sabotage, Thomas added. Someone wanted these numbers ruined before your presentation. Sharon's pulse hammered. Douglas's 6-day deadline was nearly up. She had 48 hours to explain catastrophic overnight failure, or watch everything she'd built collapse. She straightened her spine. We're not done, she said. We're just getting started. Pull every raw data file. I want timestamps, user logs, access trails. We find the truth. The team scattered to their stations. Sharon stared at the corrupted numbers glowing on her screen. A declaration. A threat. A line drawn by someone who did not want her to succeed. And she whispered, Whoever did this, you're about to regret underestimating me. What comes next will shake the entire company. Sharon barely slept. The sabotage had turned the pilot metrics into a disaster zone, and the board presentation was now less than 48 hours away. But she didn't crumble. Not even for a moment. She gathered her team, rolled up her sleeves, and dove headfirst into the mess. This wasn't just numbers anymore. This was survival. By midnight on Friday, the HR corner had transformed into something between a command center and a battlefield. Screens glowed, coffee pooled, papers littered the desks like fallen soldiers. Patrick's fingers flew across his keyboard. Linda muttered formulas under her breath. Thomas kept everyone supplied with caffeine like he was fueling an army. We found it, Patrick finally said. Look, Sharon leaned over his shoulder. On the screen was a timestamp, the exact moment the data had changed. Whoever accessed the system did it using a shared operations login, Patrick explained. Someone with high clearance. Mr. Drayton's department. Sharon wasn't surprised, but she didn't have proof strong enough to accuse him. Pull the raw pre-sabotage data, she said. We'll rebuild the real story. They worked until their eyes stung. Sharon created new charts by hand when systems lagged. She wrote employee summaries. She compiled testimonials, including one that made her stop mid-sentence. My father died last year. I missed 2 days of work for the funeral. I almost got written up for it. When the pilot changes started, it was the first time I felt like the company didn't see me as expendable. Sharon closed her eyes for a moment, chest tight. This goes in the presentation, she whispered. That's bold, Jennifer warned. Some execs hate emotional arguments. It's not emotion, Sharon replied. It's truth. Saturday arrived with a hush. Dawn broke over the skyline with the cold light of judgment. Sharon dressed carefully, crisp blouse, dark blazer, hair pulled back. Not glamorous, not meek, professional, unapologetic. She arrived early. Douglas was already there. He stood by the conference room window, staring out like a general contemplating a battle he wasn't sure he'd win. When he turned, something unguarded flickered across his expression. You look ready, he said quietly. I am, he hesitated. Your numbers, are they? The truth, she finished for him. Sabotaged, but the truth is intact. You'll see. Douglas didn't answer. He simply nodded and walked inside. The directors filed in. Suits rustled. Pens clicked. The atmosphere had the taste of tension and power, sterile, sharp, unforgiving. Mr. Martins gave Sharon a reassuring smile. Douglas cleared his throat. We will hear Miss Luke's findings now. He stepped aside, allowing her center stage. That alone shocked people. Sharon connected her laptop to the screen. Her first slide appeared a simple title, The Real Cost of Efficiency. Then she began. Calm, measured, precise. The initial pilot results appeared catastrophic, she said. But upon investigation, we discovered unauthorized data manipulation. A ripple of murmurs spread. But here, Douglas rose to address the room. His voice was steady, but something in it had changed. I was skeptical, he admitted. But Miss Luke has demonstrated initiative, intelligence, and a commitment to truth even under pressure. Sharon blinked. Douglas giving her public praise? The room definitely noticed. I support her proposal, he finished, and I recommend expanding the pilot. Boom. The energy shifted instantly. Agreed. Seconded. Approved. Just like that, Sharon's first major win was real. And one more thing, Mr. Martins added. I'd like Sharon to lead the expanded implementation. She's proven she can handle it. Promotion, responsibility, recognition. Sharon's mouth parted in stunned silence. Douglas really looked at her with something like admiration tangled with something he didn't yet have a name for. She nodded. Thank you. I won't disappoint. First applause, brief but genuine, filled the room. Executives left slowly, many stopping to shake Sharon's hand. Compliments drifted like scattered petals. Douglas lingered. When finally only the two of them remained, he approached. He pulled something from his inside pocket. Her breath caught. It was an envelope. The 5,000 I promised you, he said softly. From the gala. She stared. I don't want it now, she whispered. It's not a bribe, he replied. It's correction. He hesitated, then added, You earned far more than this today, and I was wrong about you. About a lot. He placed the envelope gently on the table, then stepped back. And the rumors? Sharon asked quietly. Stopping today, he said. All of them. Their eyes held tense, warm, confused. Something was there. A pull neither could ignore. Before either could name it, her phone buzzed. A notification. An email. From Anonymous. Subject. Urgent data manipulation report. Her blood ran cold. She opened it. The message was short. Sharon Luke falsified pilot data. Check her files. She's lying to the board. Attached was a doctored screenshot implying she'd altered numbers herself. Her breath caught. Her hands trembled. Douglas saw her expression. What is it? Sharon turned the phone toward him. His face hardened instantly. This is an attack. Not a mistake. Not a rumor. A war. And she had 48 hours before everything she'd built was ripped out from under her. What's about to happen next will shake the entire company to its core. The email spread through Porter Enterprises like gasoline hitting open flame. It took fewer than 20 minutes. By the time Sharon walked from the boardroom to the elevator, people were whispering in clusters. Screens lit up with the notification. Some gasped. Some smirked. Some avoided looking at her altogether. Anonymous tip. Pilot data was manipulated. Sharon Luke falsified results. Promotion based on favoritism. CEO involvement suspected. Her stomach dropped. Favoritism? Manipulation? And dragging Douglas into it? Sharon forced herself not to react. She kept walking steady. Controlled, though her heart hammered so loudly she was sure the elevator walls could hear it. When the door shut, she exhaled shakily. Douglas stood beside her, jaw clenched, fury vibrating off him like heat. They're going after both of us, he muttered. No. Sharon replied quietly, eyes forward. They're going after me. You're collateral. The elevator descended. You didn't do anything wrong, Douglas said. And someone is counting on nobody believing that, she whispered. When Sharon reached the HR department, everything went silent. Conversations died mid-sentence. A few people stepped back like she'd entered carrying something contagious. Jennifer rushed to her. Sharon, oh God. I'm so sorry, she said, eyes filled with worry. The board. They're calling an emergency audit. Of course they are, Sharon said softly. They have to. Patrick ran up next. We know you didn't do this. Linda nodded fiercely. We're with you. Whatever you need. The support cracked something inside her, gratitude, fear, exhaustion, but she pushed it down. I need every raw file, every version history, every interview transcript. Sharon said, straightening. If they want transparency, they'll get all of it. And the rumors? Jennifer asked hesitantly. Sharon's throat tightened, but her voice held firm. Rumors die when truth stands long enough. Sharon was summoned within the hour. The boardroom that had applauded her yesterday now felt like an execution chamber. Directors sat stiffly, expressions hard to read. Mr. Martins gave her a sympathetic look, but even he couldn't shield her from what came next. The legal counsel cleared her throat. Miss Luke, you're aware of the allegations. Yes. Did you alter the pilot numbers in any way? No. Did you influence the CEO in order to obtain your position? Douglas sat forward sharply. That is outrageous. She held up a hand. Let me answer, she said quietly. Douglas froze. The board watched. No, Sharon said. Everything I earned through evidence and work. Nothing more. The legal counsel clicked her pen. We will conduct a full audit. Until then, your pilot oversight is on hold. A dagger. Sharon nodded. Then audit everything. I have nothing to hide. By noon, the story leaked. Not the truth, but the lie. A finance gossip site posted. Housekeeper turned analyst caught manipulating data company cover-up. Employees stared openly as she walked past. 2 interns whispered loudly. See? I knew she wasn't legit. Figures. Pretty face, CEO connection. Sharon kept walking. Every step felt heavier than the last. By 3 p.m., reporters gathered outside the building. By 4 p.m., hashtags began spreading online. Hashtag Sharon Scandal. Hashtag Dataly. Hashtag Galagate. Sharon shut herself in a conference room, hands on the table, breathing shakily. She could quit. Walk away. Pretend none of this ever happened. But another voice rose in her chest, steady. The same voice that spoke at the gala. No one gets to erase what you've built. She lifted her chin. I'm not running. The auditors arrived the next morning. 3 stern professionals entered her workspace with clipboards and neutral expressions. She had expected hostility. What she got was, procedure. We'll need access to all raw data, one said. Every file, timestamp, communication. Sharon gestured to the organized folders she had prepared all night. It's all here. And whatever isn't, tell me. I'll find it. The auditors blinked, surprised. You're cooperating? Truth doesn't need defense, she replied. Only light. Jennifer whispered from behind. That was smooth. Sharon spent hours walking the auditors through everything from interviews to process maps to early drafts of the optimization model. Meanwhile, whispers spread. She's brave. She's hiding something. No, she's being framed. The company divided into 2 silent camps. Her team remained loyal. Everyone else remained doubtful. 2 days into the audit, Patrick burst into Sharon's temporary office. You need to see this. He pulled up the pilot logs again, zooming into a detail so tiny she'd missed it. The sabotage wasn't just data. It was a digital fingerprint. Each login, though masked as Operations Dep General, recorded something invisible to most users. Session duration. Mouse movement pattern. Typing cadence. We compared the typing rhythm to internal workstation patterns, Patrick said, voice trembling with adrenaline. And? It matches, Drayton. Sharon exhaled sharply. The operations director, the same man who had glared holes through her during every meeting. The same man who spoke against her reforms. The same man rumored to want her gone. We need proof, Sharon said. Patrick smiled grimly. We have it. Mr. Martins scheduled a private meeting. Present. Sharon, Douglas, 3 board members, and Drayton. The moment Sharon entered, Drayton scoffed. This is ridiculous. I have better things to do than indulge paranoia. Then by all means, Douglas said coldly. Feel free to explain why your login sabotaged the pilot data. Drayton froze. What? Mr. Martins folded his hands. We have the audit trails, time logs, and workstation match. You accessed the pilot at 2:14 a.m. That's impossible. Anyone could have, someone must have. She's lying. Sharon stared at him, calm, steady. No, I don't need to lie, she said softly. Your work speaks for itself. Drayton's face turned crimson. You little techie, you think you can waltz in here, play the hero, and— Enough, Douglas snapped, rising from his chair. This wasn't the cold, superior man she once worked for. This was someone defending her. You attempted to sabotage a company project, Douglas continued, and dragged her name through the mud to do it. You endangered shareholder confidence. You harmed employee morale, and you tried to ruin someone whose only crime was doing her job better than you. Drayton sputtered, cornered. You're protecting her because you're involved. The room erupted in murmurs. Sharon's pulse spiked. Douglas stepped closer, not to her, but in front of her. I'm protecting her, he said. voice low and dangerous. Because I was wrong about her once. I won't make that mistake again. Drayton's downfall was swift. Security escorted him out. The board began drafting termination proceedings. The auditors cleared Sharon's data entirely. But the damage wasn't fully undone, not yet. After the meeting, Sharon stood by the window, trying to steady her breathing. Her career was safe, but her heart felt unmoored. Douglas approached quietly. "You did nothing wrong," he said. "I know," she whispered. But almost no one believed that. "I did." She turned sharply. Douglas met her eyes without hesitation. "Not at first," he admitted. "But today, I believed in you more than I've believed in anyone in a long time." The world softened around the edges. "I'm sorry," he added, "for how I treated you, for every doubt, for every assumption." Her chest tightened. She didn't trust herself to speak. "Sharon," he continued, voice quieter, "you've changed this place. You've changed me." Something flickered between them, unspoken, magnetic, dangerous. She stepped back slightly, grounding herself. "Douglas, the board still has to vote on my final appointment," she said. "My entire future depends on people who still might doubt me." His expression darkened protectively. "They won't. You don't know that." He paused. "Then I'll make sure they do." "Douglas," she started. He held up a hand. "No lines crossed. Not at work. Not unless—" His voice trailed off. "Not unless you wanted something more later." Sharon froze, and for one terrifying second she almost said it. Almost. But logic snapped her back. "Right now," she whispered. "They can't know anything about us. Not even—" Tension. His jaw flexed. "Agreed." A knock interrupted them. Mr. Martins poked his head into the room. "Sharon? The board has sent over the appointment documents for your final review. The vote will happen tomorrow morning." Her breath caught. Tomorrow, her entire future distilled to a single moment. Douglas looked at her, eyes full of something she couldn't fully read. Fear? Hope? Want? "Whatever happens," he said softly, "you're not facing it alone." Sharon swallowed hard, because the question now wasn't just, would the board accept her? It was also, if they did, what would she and Douglas do about the impossible thing growing between them? The chapter ends there, on the edge of two decisions that could change everything. What's coming next will test ambition, loyalty, and the heart itself. The next morning arrived like a held breath. Sharon stood outside the executive boardroom, hands clasped, heart pounding, her entire future hanging in the balance of 12 people sitting behind a polished glass table. Inside, the vote was underway. Outside, she felt time slow until it almost stopped. Jennifer squeezed her arm. "You'll be fine. They know the truth now," Thomas added. "And if they don't vote in your favor, I'm staging a protest in the lobby." Patrick nodded solemnly. "I brought poster boards." She laughed softly. Their support meant more than they knew, but she couldn't shake the fear that the board might still hesitate. A former housekeeper, now a powerful voice in the company. Some people didn't like that kind of story. Finally, the door opened. Mr. Martin stepped out, expression unreadable for a terrifying second. "Sharon," he said. She swallowed. "The board has made their decision." Another beat. Then, they voted unanimously. "Congratulations, Director Luke." The hallway erupted in cheers. Jennifer hugged her. Patrick fist-pumped the air. Thomas spun her around once before she could stop him. Sharon pressed her hand to her mouth as emotion surged. After everything, the humiliation, the sabotage, the uphill battle, the company had chosen her. Douglas appeared in the doorway behind Mr. Martins, watching her reaction quietly. His eyes softened when she met his gaze. "Thank you," she whispered mostly to herself, to the universe, to every version of her who kept pushing. The board invited her inside to say a few words. She stood at the head of the table, the place she once thought she'd never belong. "First," she said, voice steady though her hands trembled slightly. "Thank you for trusting me despite everything that happened. The last few weeks were difficult, but they revealed something important." She looked at each person in turn. No company succeeds because of numbers alone. It succeeds because people show up every day and give their best. My job is to give them my best back. A few directors nodded subtly. She continued. I'm here because I wasn't alone. Jennifer, my department, the incredible employees who spoke honestly with me, they made this possible, and I promise to honor that trust with transparency, compassion, and evidence-based decisions. Mr. Martin smiled, clearly proud. When she finished, the room applauded, even Douglas, especially Douglas. By lunchtime, the news had spread. Employees peeked into HR to congratulate her. Senior executives shook her hand with stiff, reluctant respect. A few muttered half apologies for doubting her earlier. One older director approached her in the hallway. I misjudged you, he admitted quietly. You've earned your place here. Sharon accepted it with grace. Not everyone could swallow pride so publicly. Her new office was still being prepared, so she spent the afternoon meeting with department heads outlining her first reforms, policy changes, mandatory wellness breaks, managerial empathy training, anonymous employee feedback channels, modernized onboarding sequences, a pilot mentorship program. These weren't just numbers on paper. They were the very things she wished existed when she scrubbed office floors unnoticed, and now she could build them. That evening, the company hosted a charity event, a pre-planned gala supporting youth education. Sharon hadn't planned to attend, but Mr. Martins insisted, You're leadership now. People need to see you. So she went. The ballroom was glowing with candles and polished silver. Live music floated through the air. She wore a sleek navy dress, not extravagant, but confident. She belonged here now. As she scanned the room, her eyes met Douglas's across the crowd. He froze. Not with shock, but with something warmer, something dangerous. He walked toward her slowly, like he wasn't sure this moment was real. You look... He stopped, struggling for the right word. Presentable? She teased softly. He shook his head. No, you look like yourself. The version of you I should have seen a long time ago. Her breath caught. Douglas. Wait, he murmured. Before you say anything, I need to say this. They stepped aside from the crowd, near a quiet balcony hallway lit by golden sconces. I fought you, he admitted. I doubted you. I tried to pay you off. More than once. A faint, almost ashamed smile tugged at his lips. And all that time, you just kept proving me wrong. Sharon looked at him, not the arrogant CEO from the penthouse, but the man who defended her when her career nearly collapsed, who stood beside her when the company turned cruel. You changed, she whispered. You made me, he murmured back. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Sharon. His voice dropped, raw and careful. I don't want to cross a line. Not after everything. But I need to know. If there's something here. Between us. She stepped closer, not enough to commit, not enough to retreat. Professionally. She said, we need boundaries. Agreed. But personally. She exhaled. There's something. Douglas nodded slowly, relief softening the tension in his shoulders. Then allow me to take you to dinner. Not as your boss. As a man who admires you. Sharon smiled, small, real, impossible to hide. I'd like that. He reached for her hand. Not possessive, not performative, just present, and she didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined gently. Then he leaned in, pausing, waiting for the smallest sign. She closed the distance. The kiss was slow, quiet, warm, not a spark, a shift, a beginning. When they parted, both were breathless for reasons that had nothing to do with air. Douglas laughed softly. We'll need ground rules. Sharon nodded, equally dazed. Absolutely. Professional at work, honest at home, and no compromising your position, he added firmly. Good, she whispered, because I'm not giving up anything I've earned. A heartbeat, a shared smile, a new chapter opening like the city skyline behind them. Over the next month, Sharon led transformation after transformation. Employee satisfaction shot up, turnover dropped. Productivity increased without a single layoff. Articles circulated. Porter Enterprises models new age of people-first management. From housekeeper to director, the rise of Sharon Luke. One morning, she appeared on a local business program. Nervous but steady, she talked about dignity, data, and behavioral culture. That afternoon, her phone buzzed with a number she hadn't seen in months. Her mother, Sharon stepped outside to answer. "Baby," her mother said, voice trembling. "I saw you on TV." A sniff. "I always knew you were meant for something big." Tears slipped from Sharon's eyes, quiet ones she didn't bother to wipe away. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered. I'm trying." "You're doing more than trying," her mother said proudly. "You're becoming." Sharon hung up with her heart full of relief, pride, and a sense of coming home to herself. If you believe in second chances and dignity, like and share this story. Someone out there needs to hear it. Late one evening, as Sharon wrapped up work, Jennifer stepped into her office with raised eyebrows. "You have a visitor." "Who?" "A representative from Brightspan Global." Sharon's pulse quickened. Brightspan was a multinational powerhouse far bigger than Porter Enterprises. A sharply dressed woman entered, offering a business card. Elena Reyes, Chief Talent Strategist. Brightspan Global. "Director Luke," she said with a measured smile. "We've been watching your work, and we're impressed." Sharon blinked. "Thank you, I think," Elena continued. "Brightspan is preparing to overhaul its entire organizational culture. We need someone bold, innovative, proven under pressure." She slid a sleek envelope across the desk. "We want you to head the transformation, globally." Sharon stared at her speechless. "You don't have to answer now," Elena added. "But understand this. What you did here, you could do for the world." She left with a polite nod. Sharon remained still, envelope in hand, mind racing. Her dream job, her dream impact, her dream future. But accepting it might mean leaving Porter Enterprises, leaving her team, leaving Douglas. She closed her eyes, pulse pounding. The future had just opened a brand new door, and walking through it could change everything again. What comes next will force Sharon to make the biggest decision of her life. 6 months later, Porter Enterprises didn't look like the same company. Not in the numbers, not in the culture, not in the way people carried themselves through the hallways. It looked alive, engaged, human. Graphs that once sloped downward now rose steadily like a healed heartbeat. Employee satisfaction, plus 37%. Turnover reduction, 22%. Customer complaints, 48%. Productivity, plus 19%. Even more surprising, Sharon's reforms had spread beyond HR. Managers now attended empathy workshops. Teams used behavioral data to build healthier workflows. Break rooms had transformed from silent zones into collaborative spaces. And employees, real people who had once walked with slumped shoulders, now greeted each other with something rarely seen in corporate buildings. Hope, Carla, a customer support agent, used to cry in her car before work. With reduced call quotas and new conflict resolution training, she now won Employee Mentor of the Month. Justin, a warehouse staffer who planned to quit after burnout, became team lead after Sharon's optimized shift rotations proved his strengths. Marina, the senior analyst once labeled difficult, found herself leading a cross-department project after Sharon recognized her untapped strategic talent. Small changes, small victories, but together they shifted the soul of the company. And every time an employee succeeded, Sharon felt a quiet warmth in her chest. This was why she fought. Sharon sat in her new office, a corner one, filled with natural light and plants people gifted her over the months. She scanned a framed graph Jennifer had made for her. From pilot to promise, the Sharon effect. A joke, a compliment, a simplified representation of blood, sweat, doubt, and triumph. Her phone buzzed. It was her mother. "My star," her mother said in her soft voice. "I saw the newspaper article today. Director Luke. That sounds good, Sharon laughed. "It still feels unreal." "You earned it," her mother replied. "Every inch." After the call, Sharon leaned back in her chair, letting her eyes drift across the skyline. 6 months ago, her life had been defined by a single decision. $5,000, one night, one impossible request. She thought the money would change things. But it was never the money, it was her voice. Her courage, her refusal to stay invisible any longer. One rainy evening, Sharon returned to Douglas's penthouse, not as his housekeeper, not as the girl scrubbing floors, but as the woman he now trusted, respected, and loved. She had come to pick up an old coat she'd forgotten the day she quit. The moment she stepped inside, memory hit her like warm wind. The scent of polished marble, the echo of her mop bucket clattering, the very spot where Douglas first made his outrageous proposal. $5,000, she whispered to herself with a laugh. You had no idea what you were starting. Footsteps approached. Douglas appeared from the hallway, tired from meetings, but with that familiar softness in his eyes reserved only for her. You found the coat? He asked. Yeah, she said, holding it up. Feels like a lifetime ago. He stepped closer, brushing a thumb over her hand as he took the coat, then setting it aside. 6 months, he murmured. And look where you are now. Where we are, she corrected. His expression warmed. Public scrutiny had been intense at first, rumors of favoritism, debates over CEO-director relationships, whispers from those who envied her rise. But Douglas never wavered. Not once. They didn't flaunt their relationship, but they didn't hide it either. Inside the company, they were relentlessly professional. Outside it, they were simply two imperfect people, learning how to love without losing themselves. Douglas cupped her cheek gently. You know, he said. Sometimes I think about the gala, how I asked you to stay silent, and I think about how I ignored you, she teased. He laughed softly. Best decision you ever made. They stood together in the quiet of the penthouse, no longer employer and employee, but equals, partners. You ready for tomorrow? Douglas asked. Sharon inhaled deeply. Tomorrow wasn't just another board meeting. It was something bigger. The auditorium filled slowly executives, HR leaders, psychologists, analysts, journalists. Some had flown across the country just to hear her speak. The marquee displayed her name. Sharon Luke, Director of People and Organizational Culture, keynote speaker, the human engine of business. She waited backstage with Mr. Martins. I knew you were special the night you spoke at the gala, he said gently. But this is beyond anything I imagined. Sharon smiled. Thank you for seeing me before anyone else did. Go show them who you are, he said, patting her shoulder. The lights dimmed. Her introduction echoed across the hall. Then she stepped onto the stage. Applause rose like a wave. When it quieted, she began. 6 months ago, I was nobody in the corporate world. Murmurs. Curiosity. I was a housekeeper. I cleaned offices where decisions were made that affected thousands of lives. I saw employees cry in stairwells, managers drown in stress, teams break under pressure. She paused, steady, grounded. I studied psychology at night, not because I hoped for opportunity, but because I hoped for purpose. The audience leaned in, and then one night, someone paid me $5,000 to sit quietly at a gala. Instead, I decided to speak. Soft laughter spread. That moment taught me something powerful. When you understand people not as numbers, not as costs, not as assets, but as human beings, business transforms. She clicked to her slides, charts, testimonials, data woven with stories. We didn't save Porter Enterprises by cutting. We saved it by caring. We didn't rise by competing. We rose by connecting. The crowd was silent, not bored, silent. Moved silent. For years, the corporate world taught us that empathy was weakness, that efficiency required sacrifice, that profit required dehumanization. Her voice warmed, strengthened. But data tells a different story. Psychology tells a different story. People tell a different story. She held up her notes, then let them fall onto the podium. Our job is not to manage numbers. It's to guide the humans who make those numbers possible. A standing ovation erupted, not polite, not forced, but thunderous. Sharon's eyes glistened. She had spoken her truth, and it had landed. As the ovation softened, her voice returned gentle, but firm. If this story, my story, reminds you that your past doesn't define your future, then let it light something inside you. And if it inspired you, like, subscribe, and share. Tell me where you're watching from, and what you'd do in my shoes, because every voice matters, including yours. The crowd applauded again. After the conference, Sharon walked through the hallway with Douglas beside her, close, but respectful of the public setting. Outside the glass doors, the city stretched endlessly, glowing under the afternoon sun. A driver greeted them, but Sharon paused. I want to walk, she said. Douglas nodded with an affectionate smile. I'll walk with you. She entered the building lobby again. Porter Enterprises. The place that once doubted her, now shaped by her. Employees greeted her warmly. Director Luke. Great speech. You changed things around here. She smiled at each one. Then she stepped into the executive meeting room, once intimidating, now familiar, and closed her eyes briefly. $5,000, one night, one choice, and now, a legacy. She opened her eyes and walked confidently to the head of the table as sunlight washed through the glass walls. The skyline behind her brightened, and Sharon Luke, housekeeper turned director, silent girl turned leader, took her place.